Thank you for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm Lisa
Perfect.
Grimes. I'm the digital marketing analyst at Geographic Solutions, and I'll be conducting the majority of the interview. Okay, so if you kind of just want to introduce yourself really quick, give a little background and a background on any NAWDP, that would be amazing.
Sure. So my name is Melissa Robbins. I am the CEO for the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. I've been in this role for about 7 years now. Prior to coming to NAWDP, I was at the local level. So I started in the fiscal world, actually, and then ended up as a local board director in a rural region in Missouri. And so I've been in workforce for about 18 years now. One of those things where I would have probably never told you I was going into workforce. And now that I've been in it for this amount of time, I don't know that there's anything else that I would ever want to do. Um, NAWDP is a fantastic association. It has grown and changed over the years. You know, NAWDP has been around since 1984. So 40 years at this point that we've been an association representing professionals in this industry. And our mission has always been the same. Our mission has always been to enrich the workforce community. And we do that through, connecting and advancing individuals, building partnerships. It has evolved over time as legislation has changed in, how do we best serve our members? But overall, we've had the same mission for about 40 years now.
Nice. Sounds like a great organization. So, in January, you joined our CEO, Paul Toomey, for a panel discussion on the future of WIOA, or the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Politics and Technology in 2024. What changes have you observed in workforce development this year?
I think the biggest changes that I've seen in workforce development this year are really the inclusion of what I would consider non-traditional partners to the system. So, when you talk about the workforce system, a lot of people talk about the government funded, the Department of Labor side. Currently the legislation is WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and there are required partners and under that act. But what we've seen, especially post pandemic, is there has been a huge infusion of money into different programs that are not what I would call traditional workforce programs. So a lot of transportation, a lot of those types of things, and it's really brought some non-traditional partners into the system. And so that's what we're seeing as an association. A lot of partners from healthcare, insurance, who are definitely a part of the larger ecosystem, really working together on programs, which is really exciting.
That is exciting. So now going into a little bit about Workforce Development Month. So what is, would you say, the importance of Workforce Development Month, and what was NAWDP's role in Workforce Development Month?
Yeah, sure. So Workforce Development Month was actually created by NADA back in 2005 to raise awareness of the importance of the workforce industry. And back in 2005, it was actually in May. So it didn't change to September until 2012. But really, that has been, what we try to do throughout the entire month is just highlight the industry, highlight all of the different parts and people that go into making up the industry, making sure that we actually have a program that I love. It's called Workforce Heroes. So we will highlight multiple workforce heroes all throughout the month, because sometimes, your workforce professionals are doing things that change people's lives every day. And, sometimes it's not this huge award won on this national stage. It's, you truly change that person's life, their family's life, and we want to recognize all of that. So yeah, Workforce Development Month is super important to us. Like we've been doing it for about 20 years now, and it's exciting to see other people starting to take part in that recognition.
Agreed. Well, that's really awesome. Definitely celebrating heroes in workforce development. And here at Geographic Solutions, we obviously celebrate Workforce Development Month. So now I kind of want to go into the A Stronger Workforce for America Act. As you
Mhm.
know, it was passed in the House, but has not been passed in the Senate yet. But it could have some changes. It's basically kind of some differences in WIOA and changing. So kind of going
Mhm.
into this, what would you say the most pressing challenges in workforce development are today, and how did the primary goals of this A Stronger Workforce for America Act address those challenges?
So I think, and this kind of goes into, I think the next topic that we're going to talk about, which is, how does that differ? How does the new legislation differ from WIOA? I think right now the biggest challenge is to make sure that we're meeting the need of business and job seekers in the current environment. So anytime there's legislation, WIOA was passed in 2014. So we're 10 years from the last legislation passing. A lot has happened in 10 years. And the workforce system, I think, did a wonderful job. I think we were forced out of our professional comfort zone with finding ways to deliver our programs and services through in a time where we couldn't have human contact, and so really that pandemic that changed a lot, but the legislation hasn't changed. And so, I think that what we need to focus on with the new legislation is the flexibility, the flexibility to meet those changing needs as they come, because we don't get new legislation every year, we don't get new legislation every 2 years. So whatever the end product is there flexibility to meet whatever the changing needs of business and job seekers are.
Okay, and then kind of going off what you said already, how does this act differ from previous workforce development legislation, such as WIOA?
So, I think that there's definitely some things in WIOA that we're working that it tries to build on. And then there's some things that are different. The new legislation focuses on the eligible training provider list. The
Mhm.
eligible training provider list is not a perfect system, but we definitely need something, to figure out how those training dollars are going to be spent. Uh, it does address some what I would call ceilings and floors as far as funding is concerned. Um, I think we need to be really careful anytime we say you must spend a minimum percentage or you can't spend over a maximum percentage on any one particular part of a program, because ultimately what that does is that it impacts program design. So
Mhm.
instead of a job seeker or a business coming and saying, this is what I truly need to be successful, I have to design my program around some sort of cap that has to do with funding that may not ultimately meet that need. And so again, I go back to flexibility. NAWDP has to be NAWDP has to be very careful in that we have a very, very diverse set of members, who we admire very much, but sometimes our members are training providers and sometimes our members are not training providers. So we want what's best for the industry as a whole, and we truly think that legislation with the most flexibility will get us to that end goal.
And that's something I really noticed in my research of A Stronger Workforce for America Act is the focus on skills and flexibility, and training for job seekers because of the always changing skills that are needed within the workforce, which is really great.
Correct.
So kind of going back, still on the act, how will this act impact job seekers and employers in the short and the long term?
So I think any kind of change in the legislation, there's definitely going to be things that change quickly. So things within the legislation that are allowed now that weren't allowed in the past that we're going to see some immediate efforts. But we're also, anytime there's a change in legislation, particularly with implementing what's happening, you have to learn those rules. And so, I think that's where long term, it's going to take a little bit for that to roll out. 2014, when WIOA was passed, we didn't see implementation until 2 years later. So I think that, right now, the bill isn't really to the finish line yet. We've got a presidential election coming up. And so we'll see what the remainder of 2024 looks like, but we're probably looking at 2025 to see any kind of movement on anything like this. And then really just kind of getting ready to make sure that everyone is trained and ready to implement whatever the new legislation is.
Right. Yeah, I actually kind of have a question about that. If you don't mind, I'm going to skip to that question, then come back to the last
Yeah.
question. So kind of going off of that, since it's still not implemented yet and it will be coming soon, what are some of those anticipated challenges in implementing the Stronger Workforce for America Act, and how can they be overcome, would you say?
So I think any challenge or a challenge to implementing any kind of change in legislation is just the training and the awareness of the new rules. So making sure that just like WIOA, with any new legislation, there's going to be new compliance issues that are going to be black and white that we have to make sure that we get rolled out to everybody that touches, the new program. But there's also going to be, and I think what the new legislation really tries to lead to, and what WIOA tried to lead to with partnerships and bringing everybody together, there's innovative strategies that it's looking for. So those compliance issues, that's going to be like day one. We have to update or change programs, systems, paperwork, the way we do all of those things to make sure that we're in compliance with the legislation. But then how do we strategically impact the new innovative ideas on how we're going to, implement in theory the essence of this new legislation? Where NAWDP plays into that is truly making sure that we have those compliance issues covered. And then I think just to bring awareness to the fact that when new legislation passes, you're talking about hundreds of pages of a law, hundreds of pages of regulations that go along with the law. Then you have your states who are going to add additional things that are particular to their state. And then you're going to have local areas add additional things that are particular to their local area. So by the time it gets down to somebody who's sitting at a desk, who's sitting across the table from a business or a job seeker, that's a lot to learn, from day one to day two. So we will do our best to make sure that all of those changes as they roll out, everybody's aware of them. But it's going to be a huge undertaking no matter what new version of the legislation passes.
Right. Sounds like day one is going to be the roughest.
Yes, day one will always be rough.
Okay. And then my last question for you today is, how do you see the role of NAWDP evolving with this implementation of this act?
I think that our association will continue to evolve as it has since the early 80s through all of those different legislation changes that have happened. And then, like we talked about earlier, I think, what we're seeing in the industry is more of those non-traditional workforce partners coming into the system and truly being assets. Not, how can workforce, the traditional DOL funded workforce system, be an asset to what they're doing, but how can they be an asset to what we're doing? So as we continue to evolve and develop those partnerships, I think NAWDP will continue to try to meet the needs of the members and the workforce industry as a whole. I've always called NAWDP the one-stop operator of the system, because there are other great associations that represent individual partners within the workforce system. And we work with all of them. They do a wonderful job. I look at NAWDP kind of bringing all of them together as a whole to saying, okay, how can workforce overall help strengthen the economy for this country?
Great. Well, that was my last question. I think you gave some really informative answers that are going to really help me with writing my blog. I really appreciate you taking your time today and participating in this interview. Is there anything else you want to discuss or no? Okay.
Nope, I don't think so. If you guys need anything else from me on Workforce Development Month, whatever you guys need, just let me know and we'll get that to you. But if not, then good luck on the blog. Thank you for taking part in Workforce Development Month.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, perfect.
Bye. Well, have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.